The overhead lights at Wheels and Deals buzzed, their harsh glare reflecting off a sea of bicycles and scooters. George's fingers traced the sleek form of a cerulean helmet, the vibrant hue mirroring Timmy's bright eyes. A decade vanished in a heartbeat. He pictured his grandson as an infant, tiny and bundled, his grip surprisingly firm on George's thumb. He suppressed a rush of emotion. What was the right gift? Not another disposable toy destined for the landfill. This year, Timmy received his first real bike, and George aimed to offer more than mere plastic, a tangible expression of his affection and concern. Words always failed him. "Excellent choice," the clerk remarked, jolting him back to the present. "I can't be too careful, especially with these little speed demons." After the transaction, George carefully stowed the receipt in his well-worn wallet, its meager contents a testament to a life lived cautiously. The short drive to the park felt interminable. He toggled through radio stations, eventually finding solace in the gentle strains of classical music, a soothing balm to his jangled nerves. Birthday celebrations. They presented a challenge, not from any lack of love for Timmy, but because they threw his own growing irrelevance into sharp relief. The din, the throngs, that pervasive feeling of detached observation. As he parked, the sounds of the party descended. Joyous squeals, the insistent thump of kid-friendly tunes, a general uproar of orchestrated fun. He inhaled deeply, gathering his resolve. For Timmy, he told himself. He noticed David, his son, near the picnic area, his back turned as he gestured emphatically to a group of other parents. A moment of hesitation, then he shuffled toward them, the helmet a weighty presence in his hand. "Dad, you made it," David greeted him, clapping him heartily on the shoulder. "Timmy will be over the moon. He's showing off his new wheels to everyone." George offered a wan smile. "Wouldn't miss it." His gaze swept over the tables, draped in festive plastic, piled high with refreshments and gifts. A gaggle of kids swarmed around a magician, their faces lit with pure delight. It was overwhelming. "Grab a seat, Pop," David directed, already engrossed in his conversation. George surveyed the scene. Every chair was taken. Mothers exchanged whispered confidences. Fathers debated lawn care strategies. Children perched on laps, their faces smeared with frosting. No room. He spotted Sarah, his daughter-in-law, flitting between tables, replenishing snacks and orchestrating the chaos. "Sarah," he called out, his voice almost lost in the hubbub. She turned, her smile bright but fleeting. "Oh, hi, George. So glad you could make it. Timmy will be thrilled." Her gaze darted around, searching for an opening. "Oops, looks like we're packed." A shrug, dismissively casual, and she hurried off to rescue a spilled juice box. The offhand remark lingered, heavier than its simple words warranted. "Looks like we're packed." It wasn't just about a chair, was it? It spoke of years of understated self-sacrifice, of being the steady, reliable background presence, ever present but never truly noticed. The creeping awareness that he had faded into the scenery. A hot flush crept up his neck. He abhorred scenes. He simply craved belonging, a small acknowledgement of his presence. He shifted the helmet, the plastic leaving an impression on his skin. He spotted a vacant patch of green near the park's edge, beneath the generous canopy of an ancient oak. He could simply retreat there, alone. But the thought felt like a cage closing around him. He wouldn't be a nuisance. He would simply vanish. He turned, retreating from the tables, from the laughter and the clamor, from the chilling sense of utter superfluity. He headed toward the parking area, the blue helmet, a burdensome weight. He wouldn't give it to Timmy today. Not this day. He had something else to address. Something that was long overdue. Oops, we're full. The noise hit me like a wall. A cacophony of children's shrieks, tinny music leaking from a portable speaker shaped like a cartoon dog, and the incessant drone of adult conversation. Balloons bobbed and weaved in the breeze, tied to the limbs of the ancient oak that dominated Susan and Michael's backyard. I shuffled forward, a small, slightly crumpled gift bag dangling from my hand. Susan spotted me almost immediately. Her smile was bright, almost blinding, the kind reserved for public appearances. "George, you made it." She enveloped me in a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and freshly baked cupcakes. "So glad you could come. Timmy will be thrilled to see you. She steered me toward the patio, a mosaic of brightly colored plastic tables and chairs. Children swarmed like bees around a hive, their faces smeared with frosting and juice. Adults clustered in small groups, clutching plastic cups filled with lemonade or something stronger. "Just find a spot," Susan said, her voice rising to be heard above the din. "Grab some food, mingle, you know the drill." She patted my arm, a gesture that felt more like a dismissal than affection. Then her eyes widened slightly. "Oh dear." She scanned the patio, her gaze darting from table to table. A furrow appeared on her brow. "Oops," she said, her tone light and apologetic, as if she'd just spilled a drop of wine. "Looks like we're full." The words hung in the air, sharp and unexpected. My stomach clenched. It wasn't just about a chair, I knew that. It was about space, emotional space, mental space, a place at the table of their lives, and apparently there wasn't any for me. Susan, oblivious to the sudden hollowness that had bloomed in my chest, continued, Just stand for a minute. Someone's bound to leave soon, or maybe we can squeeze you in somewhere." Her eyes flicked around again, landing briefly on a small, unoccupied patch of lawn near the back fence. "Maybe over there, by the petunias." I managed a weak smile. No, I'm fine," I said, my voice sounding thin and reedy even to my own ears. I'll just watch from here." I retreated, backing away from the patio and the swirling chaos of the party. I found myself standing near the edge of the yard, close to the weathered wooden fence that separated Michael and Susan's manicured lawn from the overgrown field beyond. The air here was a little quieter, the scent of freshly cut grass replaced by the earthier smell of wildflowers and damp soil. From my vantage point, the party looked like a brightly colored, slightly out-of-focus painting. I watched Timmy, a miniature version of Michael, tearing across the lawn. His new helmet, the one I'd chosen so carefully, perched precariously on his head. He was surrounded by a gaggle of friends, their laughter echoing in the afternoon air. Michael stood by the barbecue, flipping burgers with practiced ease, a beer in his hand. He laughed at something Susan said, his arm briefly encircling her shoulders. They looked like a picture-perfect family, framed by the sun-drenched yard and the joyous energy of the party. I watched them, a strange mixture of longing and resignation swirling inside me. I saw the easy camaraderie, the effortless connection, the unspoken understanding that bound them together. And I knew, with a clarity that stung, that I was an outsider, a spectator, a forgotten piece of furniture relegated to the dusty corner of their lives. The sun beat down on my neck, a heavy, oppressive weight. The laughter and chatter of the party seemed to mock me, highlighting my isolation. Even the bright, cheerful colors of the balloons seemed garish, almost cruel. I reached into my pocket and fingered the small wooden bird I'd carved for Timmy. I'd spent hours sanding and painting it, carefully crafting each feather, each delicate detail. I had imagined Timmy's face lighting up when he saw it, the spark of connection between grandfather and grandson. But now it just felt like another unwanted object, another reminder of my own irrelevance. I closed my hand around it, the smooth wood pressing into my palm. I would keep it. It was for me. I took a deep breath, the air heavy with the scent of burgers and burnt sugar. I knew what I had to do. It wasn't going to be easy, but I couldn't stay here clinging to the edges of a life that no longer had a place for me. I had to find my own space, my own table, my own reason to be. It was time to start clearing out. The weight of memories. The drive dissolved in a wash of crimson taillights and spiraling regrets. Susan's offhand dismissal. "Oops, looks like we're full," replayed relentlessly, the careless cadence cutting deeper than the words themselves. Hands clenched on the wheel, I forced my attention onto the asphalt ribbon unwinding before me. My neighborhood, usually a balm, felt like a stage set mocking my solitude. Each clipped hedge, each porch swing, a silent endorsement of family life, a life I'd somehow misplaced. The house loomed, a silent brick sentinel guarding echoes of laughter and the ghost of simmering herbs. Nothing had altered since Martha's passing. Her knitting lay dormant in its basket, a cascade of unfinished yarn, a symbol of promises unkept. Smiles radiated from the mantle's photo gallery, sun-drenched vacations, beaming graduations, long-ago holidays. These were captured joys, a stark contrast to the hollowness that now permeated every room. I lowered myself into Martha's favorite armchair, the time-worn fabric soft against my skin. With my eyes closed, I could almost catch the faint hum of her melodies, the almost silent syncopation of her clicking needles. I recollected the vibrant chaos of past birthday celebrations, the joyous pandemonium as kids romped through the house, the sweet scent of vanilla frosting, the warm embrace of kin. Martha had been our keystone, the linchpin bonding us all. Now scattered like fallen leaves, we were each tumbling along in a world without her. An unexpected tsunami of grief crashed over me. Not just for Martha, though her absence echoed in every beat of my heart, but for the irretrievable moments, the chances I hadn't seized, the decades spent adrift within the confines of my own existence. So preoccupied with roles, spouse, father, provider, I'd neglected to nurture the very essence of myself. I opened my eyes, my gaze sweeping across the room. Antiquated furniture, walls adorned with sentimental trinkets and images, each object a touchstone, a chronicle of the past. But the past was gone, a poignant, beautiful mirage, yet divorced from my current reality. I rose and wandered through the house, room by room. The dining room, site of countless shared meals. The kitchen, where Martha had spun culinary magic. The spare bedroom, once a nursery, then a guest suite, now simply a repository for forgotten relics. Each space formed a private museum of my life, a validation of days gone, both treasured and stifling. The weight of it all pressed down, an oppressive burden stealing my breath. I felt entombed within these walls, captive to the tendrils of memory that clung like shadows. It was paramount to break free, to cast off the weight of prior years and construct a new life. But how? The question hung suspended, unanswered and immense. I was lost, unsure where to begin, what to do. All I knew was that I couldn't linger here, encompassed by these specters, inhabiting a life that no longer resonated. I needed to identify a reason to get up each morning, a new path to explore, a reinvented self. I had to rediscover myself. A radical decision. The digital clock on the nightstand glowed 3:17 a.m. in angry red numerals. Sleep remained a distant shore, unattainable across a sea of churning thoughts. Each wave brought the same debris. Martha's ghost, the echo of children's laughter now muted, and the sting of Sarah's words. Oops, looks like we're full. The offhandedness of it, the casual dismissal, resonated deeper than any shouting match could have. It wasn't just about a chair, it was about a life I'd let shrink, become defined by these four walls, by memories that were now suffocating me. I sat up, the old mattress groaning in protest. My legs felt stiff as I swung them over the side of the bed and stood. The floorboards were cold beneath my bare feet, a stark reminder of the chill that had settled in my bones long before the weather turned. I shuffled to the window, pulling back the heavy curtain. The world outside was shrouded in darkness, save for the pale glow of a distant street lamp. I needed to change, not just rearrange the furniture or take up a new hobby. I needed a fundamental shift, a tearing down and rebuilding. The thought, once unthinkable, now felt undeniably right. I would sell it all. Everything. The decision, once made, settled into me with surprising calm. It wasn't a grand, dramatic act of rebellion. It was practical. A necessary surgery to excise the parts of my life that were poisoning me. I would be free of the weight, free of the expectations, free to define my own worth, even at this late stage. Dawn arrived, painting the sky in hues of rose and grey. I made a pot of strong coffee, the aroma filling the kitchen. A scent that once brought Martha bustling in, ready to start the day. Today, it just reminded me of her absence, but also of the quiet strength she always possessed. After coffee, I started in the attic. Boxes upon boxes, filled with the detritus of a life lived. Old photo albums, their covers faded and cracked. Baby clothes, still smelling faintly of lavender. Trophies from long-forgotten baseball games. Each item a tiny anchor, tethering me to the past. I worked methodically, creating 3 piles, one for items I would keep, mostly photographs of Martha and the kids from when they were little, another for items I would donate to charity. The third and largest pile was for the auctioneer. Furniture, tools, knickknacks, the accumulated possessions of 78 years. Sorting through Martha's sewing box brought a lump to my throat. Her thimble, worn smooth from years of use, sat nestled amongst spools of thread. A half-finished quilt lay beneath, the colors vibrant even after all this time. I carefully folded the quilt and added it to the keep pile. I would finish it, for her, for me. The physical act of sorting was exhausting, but strangely cathartic. With each item placed in a pile, I felt a little lighter, a little less burdened. I found an old woodworking project I'd started years ago, a small rocking horse for my granddaughter. It was unfinished, the wood rough and unpainted. I added it to the keep pile. Maybe, just maybe, I would finally finish it. Not for her, but for myself. A testament to the fact that I could still create, still contribute, still be something more than just an empty seat at a birthday party. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the attic, I stood back and surveyed my work. The piles were daunting, a physical manifestation of the life I was about to dismantle. But amidst the chaos, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. A fragile, nascent hope, but hope nonetheless. The kind of hope that whispers, it's not too late. You can still begin again. Letting go. The flimsy for sale signs, hammered into the soft earth of my front yard, looked accusing under the afternoon sun. They were printed on cheap cardstock, the kind Bethany used for her school fundraisers. I'd felt a pang of guilt even buying them, a small rebellion against a lifetime of frugality. Each sign felt like a tiny obituary for a piece of my life. The first few hours were quiet. Sparrows flitted amongst the azaleas, their chirping a mocking chorus to my solitude. I sat on the porch swing, the rhythmic creak a familiar comfort, and watched the occasional car slow down, its occupants craning their necks before speeding on. Doubt gnawed at me. Maybe this was madness. Maybe I should call the whole thing off, haul everything back inside and pretend none of this ever happened. Then Mrs. Henderson, from across the street, appeared. She always reminded me of a disapproving owl, perched on her porch with binoculars and a permanent frown. She didn't bother with greetings, just pointed a bony finger at the antique clock I'd placed near the driveway. "How much for that monstrosity?" she barked, her voice raspy. I quoted a price higher than I expected, half hoping she'd balk. She didn't. She haggled, of course, but within minutes she was writing a check. As she and her son, a hulking figure struggling to load the clock into her minivan, drove away, I noticed the curtains twitching in several neighboring windows. The grapevine was already in bloom. By late afternoon, the trickle of browsers had turned into a steady stream. Word had gotten around. Some were genuinely interested in finding a bargain. Others were just curious, eager to witness the spectacle of George Harding's yard sale. I overheard snippets of conversations. "He's lost his mind, poor man, and something must be wrong with his finances." Each comment was a tiny pinprick, a reminder of my perceived failure. Little Timmy Johnson, the boy who used to mow my lawn, bought my old toolbox. He grinned, his missing front tooth a gap of pure joy. "Thanks, Mr. Harding, this is awesome." That small transaction warmed me. It was going to someone who would actually use it, someone who appreciated it. Maybe this wasn't all a mistake. The hardest part came with the armchair, Bethany's armchair. It sat on the porch, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, looking impossibly lonely. It was floral patterned, a bit old-fashioned, but it was her chair. She'd love to sit there, reading or knitting, the rhythmic click of her needles a constant hum in our lives. I hadn't sat in it since she passed. It was too painful. A young couple, their arms entwined, approached it hesitantly. The woman ran her hand over the worn fabric. "It's perfect," she whispered to her partner. "Just what we've been looking for." I quoted a price, my voice thick with unshed tears. They didn't haggle. They just smiled, a shared look of excitement passing between them. As they carefully carried the chair to their truck, I felt a sharp pang of loss. a physical ache in my chest. It felt like losing Bethany all over again. I watched them drive away, the armchair a splash of color in the twilight. Then I went inside, poured myself a glass of whiskey, and sat in the empty space where the armchair used to be. The house felt emptier, colder, but somehow lighter too. The weight of the past, though still present, felt a little less crushing. Letting go was painful, but maybe, just maybe, it was also the only way to move forward. The phone rang. It was my son, Michael. I braced myself. Empty spaces. The next morning dawned clear and deceptively cheerful. The for sale signs, now slightly askew, seemed to mock the emptiness that was slowly consuming the house. I sipped my coffee, the silence amplifying the tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall, a clock that would soon be gone, its rhythmic pulse replaced by what? I didn't know, and that strangely was okay. People trickled in slower than the day before, mostly serious-looking men this time, their eyes gleaming with a particular kind of hunger as they surveyed my woodworking tools. My tools, my father's tools, passed down to me. I hadn't used them much since Bethany passed. The scent of sawdust and varnish too closely tied to memories of her sitting beside me in the garage, sketching designs while I brought them to life. A burly man with calloused hands and a worn leather apron picked up my old block plane, turning it over and over. "Stanley number 4, he muttered, more to himself than to me. "Good steel." He looked up, his eyes surprisingly gentle. "So, sir, how much?" We haggled a bit, a ritual I found myself enjoying. It wasn't really about the money. It was about the connection, the shared understanding of craftsmanship. When he finally paid me, he nodded curtly, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. As he walked away, the plane tucked carefully into his tool bag, I felt a pang, but it was quickly followed by a surprising lightness, one less thing to weigh me down. The phone rang. "David." I hesitated before answering. "Dad? How's the sale going?" His voice was tight, laced with a concern that felt smothering. "Fine, David, fine. Mrs. Henderson said you were selling everything." "That's right." There was a long pause. "Dad, are you sure you're all right? Maybe you should talk to someone." "I'm talking to someone, David. I'm talking to you." Though I realized I wasn't really saying anything at all. Not about what truly mattered. But everything. What are you going to do? "I don't know yet, son, and that's the point." He sighed, a weary sound that spoke volumes about the burden he carried. "Just be careful, okay? We're worried about you." "I know, David. I'll be fine." I hung up, the word fine echoing in the suddenly vast hallway. Fine was a lie, but it was easier than the truth. The afternoon sun beat down, turning the lawn into a shimmering haze. A young couple bought my collection of vintage records, their eyes wide with excitement as they flipped through the albums. I told them stories about the musicians, about Bethany and me dancing in the living room, the memories unfolding like well-worn photographs. They left with their arms full, their laughter fading into the quiet street. With each transaction, the house felt less like a home and more like a hollow shell. The living room, once crowded with furniture and memories, was now a cavernous space. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, highlighting the bare patches on the walls where pictures had hung. The dining room table, the site of countless family dinners, stood naked and forlorn. I sold the grandfather clock to a clockmaker from out of town. He carefully dismantled it, wrapping each piece in protective cloth. As he carried the heavy pendulum out the door, the silence in the house deepened, a profound and unsettling quiet. By evening, only a few items remained. A chipped ceramic vase, a box of old photographs, a worn leather-bound book of poetry. Things too personal, too insignificant to anyone but me. I sat on the porch, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The for sale signs leaned against the porch railing, their message almost complete. The house was almost empty, and so was I. But amidst the emptiness, a flicker of something new began to stir. A sense of anticipation, of possibility. The heavy weight of the past was lifting, replaced by a lightness that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath of the cool evening air. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally moving. Wheels of freedom. The internet became my new best friend, a swirling vortex of information replacing the comforting silence of Bethany's presence. Hours dissolved as I devoured articles, watched videos, and compared models. I wasn't looking for a luxury RV or gleaming chrome and unnecessary gadgets. I needed something practical, something that felt like me, sturdy, dependable, and maybe a little rough around the edges. A camper van, small enough to navigate back roads, big enough to live in. The classifieds led me to a '98 Ford Econoline, parked on a dusty lot just outside of town. Slightly used, great condition, the ad proclaimed. Slightly turned out to be optimistic, and great condition was a blatant lie. Rust bloomed on the wheel wells. The interior smelled faintly of wet dog and stale cigarettes, and the driver's side door creaked like an ancient galleon. But beneath the grime and neglect, I saw potential. The seller, a wiry man named Earl with a mischievous glint in his eye, hovered as I circled the van. "She's got character," he offered, patting the hood. "Been all over the country, seen more sunsets than you and I combined." I kicked a tire, wincing at the hollow sound. "How much?" We haggled for an hour, a dance of offers and counter-offers, until we reached a price that felt fair. Maybe even a little too fair on my part. I suspected Earl just wanted it gone. Driving it home was an adventure in itself. The engine coughed and sputtered. The steering was loose, and the brakes felt like suggestions rather than commands. But with each mile, a grin spread across my face. This wasn't just a vehicle. It was a ticket. A ticket to somewhere. David called that evening, his voice laced with concern. "Dad, I heard you bought a van, a camper van." "That's right," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. "Dad, are you sure about this? You're not running away, are you?" "Running towards something, maybe," I replied, carefully choosing my words. "A little freedom," he sighed. "Just be careful, okay? And let us know where you are." "I always," I promised, knowing full well that always was a flexible concept these days. The next few days were a blur of activity. The van became my workshop, my canvas. I ripped out the stained carpet, scrubbed the walls, and attacked the rust with sandpaper and a wire brush. The smell of disinfectant and paint replaced the lingering odor of wet dog, a small victory in the ongoing battle against neglect. I installed a small solar panel on the roof, wired to a deep-cycle battery. A portable camping stove and a small refrigerator took up minimal space. I built a simple bed frame from scrap lumber, covering it with a thick foam mattress. It wasn't fancy, but it was functional. It was mine. My back ached, my hands were covered in splinters, and I hadn't slept properly in days. But with each improvement, with each modification, a sense of purpose bloomed within me. I wasn't just fixing a van, I was rebuilding myself. One afternoon, I found myself staring at the bare walls, a nagging feeling that something was missing. I needed something personal, something to remind me of who I was, who I wanted to be. I rummaged through the few boxes I had kept, finally unearthing a small, leather-bound journal. Bethany had given it to me years ago, urging me to write down my thoughts, my dreams. I'd always resisted, claiming I wasn't a writer. But now, as I held the worn leather in my hands, I felt a pull, a longing to capture this moment, this strange, exhilarating journey. I grabbed a pen and opened the journal, the blank pages staring back at me. What to write? Where to begin? I hesitated, then scrawled a single sentence across the top of the first page. The wheels are turning. Packing for the unknown. Packing felt like curating a life, only this time, a life designed for one. The house was emptying, room by room, sold to strangers who poked and prodded at my memories, as if they were antiques at a flea market. I tried not to watch, but the echoes of their voices, "How much for this old thing?" stung more than I cared to admit. The camper, christened Bethany's Rest in my mind, sat in the driveway, a metal canvas waiting for its story to begin. Inside, it smelled faintly of Earl's questionable air freshener and sawdust, a strange mix that somehow smelled like freedom. First, the essentials. Clothes, of course, but only the practical ones. No more starched shirts or ties gathering dust in the closet. Jeans, t-shirts, a couple of flannel shirts for cooler nights. I folded them neatly, a skill honed from years of packing for family vacations Bethany meticulously planned. A lump formed in my throat. I pushed it down. This wasn't a vacation. It was something else entirely. Then, the books. Bethany always said I had too many, but reading was one of the few joys that hadn't been tainted by grief. I ran my fingers along the spines, a silent conversation with old friends. Thoreau's Walden, a well-worn copy of Whitman's Leaves of Grass, and a collection of Robert Frost's poetry. They spoke of nature, solitude, and the enduring spirit of man, exactly what I needed. I carefully placed them in a small crate, cushioning them with an old patchwork blanket Bethany had made years ago. Its colors were faded, but the warmth it offered was timeless. I unfolded a map of the United States on the small table. It was large, the kind you'd find in a school classroom, and slightly unwieldy in the confines of the van. States bled into each other in a riot of color, promising adventure and escape. I traced my finger along the highways, imagining the endless possibilities. The Pacific Coast Highway, Route 66, the winding roads of the Blue Ridge Mountains. I had no fixed itinerary, only a vague notion of heading west, toward the setting sun. David would have a fit if he knew how aimless I was being, but aimlessness was the point. I paused, staring at the map. I should probably tell him something, shouldn't I, a postcard now and then, just so he knew I was alive. But the thought of explaining myself, of justifying my actions, was exhausting. The journal Bethany gave me years ago lay open on the passenger seat. Its blank pages were a challenge, an invitation to fill them with something meaningful. I picked up my pen, tapping it against my chin. Day 1, I wrote, or perhaps Day 1 again. The camera. I almost forgot the camera. It was an old Nikon, heavy and reliable, a relic from my amateur photography days. Bethany had always encouraged me to take it up again, but after she died, the world seemed too gray to capture. Now, though, the thought of documenting my journey, of seeing the world through a lens again, felt right. I added it to the packing list, along with extra batteries and memory cards. Maybe, just maybe, I could learn to see the beauty again. Maybe I could even find myself in the process. The yard sale continued outside, the voices of strangers bargaining for my past. Inside the van, surrounded by the essentials for my future, I felt a flicker of hope. It was a small spark, easily extinguished, but it was there. And for now, that was enough. Redwood Majesty. The engine purred, a mechanical drone accompanying the frantic pulse in George's throat. Confession avoided. He'd left a note, a yellow scrap of paper screaming cowardice from the kitchen table. The Wanderer, his camper, a name now echoing with self-mockery, devoured the asphalt, a blur of avocado and cream against the California vista. Northward, toward the Redwood National Park, he aimed. The previous night, maps had been his solace, shaky fingers tracing routes. Finding comfort in the rise and fall of the land depicted, he craved the company of ancient sentinels, silent witnesses to human folly. He needed redwoods. The trip stretched, the scenery evolving from monotonous suburbia to undulating hills, and finally, the verdant embrace he sought. A roadside diner, all chrome and vinyl, provided respite in the form of a grilled cheese and lukewarm coffee. A boisterous family occupied the neighboring booth, their sticky fingers a tableau of domesticity that stirred a nameless ache within him. He paid and fled back to the Wanderer, the park beckoning. As he neared, when the air cooled, saturated with the resinous perfume of pine and damp earth, the road constricted, spiraling into the forest's depths. At last, the sign, weathered and imposing, declared Redwood National Park. He parked at the visitors' center, a humble structure dwarfed by its surroundings. Camera bag slung, he entered a transformed world. The atmosphere was hushed. The sunlight strained through a canopy that brushed the sky. Redwoods ascended like colossal cathedrals, their bark a rough mosaic of russet and mahogany, their presence both intimidating and strangely reassuring. He selected a trail at random, a clandestine path vanishing into the emerald gloom. The ground yielded beneath his boots, cushioned by a thick layer of fallen needles. He ambled, senses heightened. The woodsy fragrance was intoxicating, the silence broken only by rustling leaves and a distant avian serenade. He raised his lens, attempting to frame a single giant. Its scale defied capture, the trunk soaring into the heavens. He clicked anyway, acknowledging the inadequacy of the image. He proceeded further into the arboreal embrace. The redwoods seemed to converge, their presence both shielding and belittling. He felt insignificant, a transient visitor in a realm that predated him by millennia and would endure long after his departure. He discovered a small clearing, a sun-drenched haven filtering through the overhead tapestry. Settling onto a fallen log, its surface cool and moist, he closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, allowing the forest to permeate his being. The weight of his sorrow, the sharp pang of Bethany's absence, remained, yet here, encompassed by these venerable giants, it felt mutated. Less lacerating, less consuming. His eyes opened, and he reached for his camera. He captured not the sweeping vistas, but the minute details, the intricate bark patterns, the vibrant ferns clinging to the trees, bases, the sunlight fractured into dancing motes. He documented the forest floor, the verdant undergrowth, the interplay of light and shadow. He wandered for hours, lost in the complex beauty of the redwood ecosystem. As dusk descended, stretching elongated shadows across the terrain, he turned back, retracing his steps toward the wanderer. Inside the camper, exhaustion mingled with a nascent sense of tranquility. He prepared a modest supper, then studied the day's photographs. They weren't masterpieces, Twitter, but they were his, a chronicle of the day, a testament to the solace he had unearthed within the redwood heartland. Bethany surfaced in his thoughts. He wondered what she would have made of this. He conjured her beside him, hand intertwined with his, eyes wide with awe. A wave of longing crested, yet this time it lacked its former crippling force. It was bittersweet, laced with the memory of shared joy. He opened his laptop and began to write. Not a letter to David, not yet, but a journal entry, a chronicle of his passage. He wrote of the redwoods, their grandeur and their stoicism. He wrote of his grief, his tentative hope, his resolve to rediscover himself. Connections on the road. Long shadows crept from the redwoods, draping the campground in deep violet and the afterglow of sunset. I'd lucked into a serviceable spot, distanced from the clamor near the restrooms, yet within reach of the campfire's fragrant pine smoke. Drawn by the snapping embers and soft murmur of voices, I found myself among fellow travelers, a woman, her silver braids a shimmering waterfall down her back, coaxed melodies from her guitar, her fingers gliding over the strings. A young couple, faces alight from their day's escapades, leaned together, sharing a drink. An older man, a bear of a fellow sporting a zazzy top beard, fussed over a vintage motorcycle parked a respectful distance away. They exuded a sense of contentment. Each seemed at ease, settled within themselves and their transient lives. I hesitated. A wave of familiar self-consciousness washing over me. Bethany would have waltzed right in, a beacon of warmth and curiosity. "Don't overthink it, George," I could almost hear her chide. Gathering my courage, I grabbed my folding chair and approached the light. "Mind if I join you?" I asked, my voice a touch gravelly. The guitarist smiled, her eyes crinkling. "Plenty of room round the fire, friend. Share a story or two." And so I did. The initial discomfort dissolved in the fire's embrace, and the easy kinship of strangers, bonded by a shared wanderlust. We swapped tales of landscapes and landmarks, treacherous passes and secluded swimming holes. Maya and Liam, the young couple, were charting a cross-country adventure, documenting their journey with striking images and heartfelt prose. Hank, the biker, had spent a decade chasing sunsets and wrenching on motorcycles in forgotten desert towns. Sarah, the guitarist, was a retired teacher, trading the classroom for a camper and a songbook. The conversation eventually turned inward, and Sarah inquired about my travels. I hesitated, unsure how much to divulge. Bethany's absence remained a raw wound, but their genuine kindness coaxed me to open up. I spoke of Bethany, our decades together, the quiet, enduring love that had been our foundation. I recounted the birthday party, the misplaced chair, the dawning realization of feeling expendable. I even mentioned the camper, the unfinished projects, the consuming need to rediscover myself. As I spoke, they offered neither clichés nor hollow comforts. They simply listened, their eyes reflecting empathy and understanding. Hank nodded slowly, his beard swaying. Maya intertwined her fingers with Liam's. Sarah strummed a soft chord, a gentle musical undercurrent to my narrative. When I finished, a comfortable stillness settled over the group. Hank broke the silence. "Sometimes," he said, his voice surprisingly soft for his size, "you gotta break things down to rebuild them stronger. Sounds like that's what you're doing." Sarah's smile radiated warmth. "The road has a way of mending," she offered. "Just keep moving." Later, as the fire faded and the stars blazed in the inky sky, I returned to the van. A weight had lifted. Sharing my story, even with strangers, felt like a release. It was as if I'd peeled back a layer of grief, revealing a glimmer of possibility beneath. Just as I was about to succumb to sleep, my phone vibrated. It was Timmy. "Grandpa," he asked, his voice brimming with youthful enthusiasm. "Thanks a ton for the helmet. It's awesome. Dad says it's the best he's ever seen." My heart swelled with affection. "You're very welcome, Timmy," I replied, my voice thick. "I'm so glad you like it." "I really do," he said. "And I hope you're having fun on your trip." "I am, Timmy," I responded, a genuine smile gracing my face. "I really am." "Dad says you're selling all your stuff," he continued, his voice losing some of its confidence. "He's kind of worried." "Don't you fret about me, Timmy," I assured him. "I'm doing fine. I'm just finding my way." "Okay," he said, sounding slightly relieved. "Well, be careful, Grandpa, and call us sometime." "I will," I promised. "I will. And Timmy." "Yeah? Tell your dad. Tell him I'm all right." I ended the call and gazed at the van's ceiling. Okay. Maybe even all right. It was a potent word, perhaps overly so. But for the first time in ages, I felt a spark of something akin to it. The road unspooled before me, rife with uncertainties and trials. Yet, it also held the promise of connection, of exploration, of a life reconstructed, 1 mile at a time. And then, bathed in starlight, under the silent gaze of the towering redwoods, I sensed I was headed in the right direction.